So I want to note that this panel will in no way be comprehensive of the many, many experiences of parenting. I hope there's a chance for us to include even more perspectives from parents of other disciplines like performing arts and other types of caregivers. But I see this as a start, and I am really grateful to the panelists today for joining us. More words of gratitude, thanks to our supporters at Con Edison, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, in partnership with the City Council, the New York State Council on the Arts with support of Governor Kathy Hochul, and the New York State Legislature, the Howard Gilman Foundation, Ford Foundation, and so many generous individuals for making our events possible. I also want to say thank you to the A4 team. Oops. Oh, I got it. The A4 team for supporting this event, including Lisa Gold, Danielle Wu, Natalie Guaman, and Grace Blackmar. I want to give an extra special thanks to Noor at Storm for hosting us today. And for being a thought partner in creating today's program. When I wrote Noor with this panel idea, she responded within hours saying she was on board and that she, as a mother and creative, had always wished for a conversation like this. I am really grateful to you and to this space, and I actually wanted to share some bittersweet news on that end. Storm will be closing down the first week of June. Over the past year, it has become a place to create, commune, and celebrate the many voices of the Shawna region. I highly encourage you to send the space off with love by checking out his other programs, many of which are family friendly. And also please buy books. They need to sell all of their inventory. In addition to the books, they also have really cute greeting cards, art, totes, and tasty Swedish fish that I can attest to. Get yourself a friend. Get yourself and a friend a gift. Yes, meet a friend. Before we hear from the panelists, I wanted to briefly introduce A4. So A4 is a 40-plus-year-old nonprofit dedicated to ensuring greater representation, equity, and opportunities for Asian American artists and cultural organizations through resource sharing, promotion, and community building. It is the only service organization in the country dedicated to professional development of AAPI artists across all disciplines and all stages of their careers. If you're new to A4, I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media to be the first to hear about opportunities and events. Now on to today's event. I am humbled to be in the company of these lovely artists and mothers, and as a new mom of an 8-month-old, being able to moderate this panel is extra special. I'm going to start by reading brief bios of each panelist, and then we can dive right in. So I'm going to begin with Hala Alyan, who is an award-winning novelist and poet whose works include Salt Houses and The Arsonist City. Her forthcoming memoir, I'll Tell You When I'm Home, explores her journey to motherhood via surrogacy and the reckonings that come with it. She works as a clinical psychologist and professor at NYU. And then we have, I guess I should go in order down this way. Shawna X is a visual artist who draws from personal self-discovery experiences in birthing and transformation, visualizing bodily sensations like contractions as illustrative symbols and glyphs. Her diverse practice spans glass, metal, painting, and textile, and she has collaborated with the New Yorker Academy Awards and Nike. And then we have Natalia Nakazawa, a Queen-based interdisciplinary artist and educator of Uruguayan and Japanese American heritage, whose community-driven projects and jacquard textiles explore cultural identity, migration, and collective storytelling. She currently serves as the artistic director at the Clemente Soto Velez Cultural and Educational Center. She also co-created the Arts Parents Group, a growing community of artists and arts workers who share resources and get together in person and virtually. And then we have Maia Ruth Lee, a multidisciplinary artist whose work explores identity amid globalization. Her work has been featured in the Whitney Biennial, the Aspen Art Museum, the Tina Kim Gallery, just to name a few. Born in South Korea and raised in Nepal, Maia is now in Colorado and serves on the board of Artists and Mothers, a nonprofit supporting artists who identifies mothers through grant making. Round of applause. So yes, I wanted to now turn it over to you all to feel free to elaborate on your bios if you'd like, and to share number of children, their ages and names if you want, and just a fun icebreaker, your favorite thing about your child or children right now. Who wants to start?
Let's go down.
We're not going to do this the entire
time.
In terms of the bio, that's great bio-wise. I have one daughter, her name's Layla. She just turned 3 2 months ago. And my favorite thing about her is the way that her and her little friends have conversations, even though they're not really having, but like watching them, they're like the gesticulations, and they pause the way that adults pause in conversation, and then they just say things like, "And pink?" Or Layla's biggest opener to people in the park is she goes, "My mama." And she like does this little bow, and it's like very, so just there's something about watching them start at this age absorbing the little like gestures and techniques of adults and not like the content. It's very adorable.
Hi, I'm Shawna. Sorry I'm so late today because my kids had birthday parties to go to. I have 2 of them. Exactly, it was crazy. They're 4 and 6, 2 girls. 4-year-old, she's definitely the artist of the family, but she wants to be a doctor when she grows up. And then she wants her older sister to be her nurse, which I think is great. And the 6-year-old, her name is Ren. She's like strong-willed. She's like me exactly. I guess that's my favorite and least favorite thing about her. So I'm working on that with her and myself at the same time. It's crazy.
No, it's so true. My name's Natalia, and I have 2. One who's 9, almost 10, and one who's 3, almost 3, 2, almost 3. And I was saying, I think I'm raising like a bruja because like the 9-year-old loves like anything that's like Wiccan or like bones. I was like saying he loves hair care products and candles and bath bombs and spa time. So we have a lot of overlap, I would say, in our interests. The almost 3-year-old just likes to dump things on the ground, so that's kind of our relationship. He's like, "Look at this," and then throws it on the floor. I'm like, that's great. But yeah, I mean, I'm just a collective person, so I'm usually working with like tons of other people as many times as possible, and I really think that, that's what parenthood is all about. It's like figuring out how to work essentially with little people who are partially yourself and are crazy, and and trying to collaborate with others to make all of it work. So.
Hi, my name's Maia. Thank you for having me. My son, Nima, is now 7. And what do I love about it? He started writing short novels, which I thought, it kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't really know if he knew how to write, and all of a sudden he was writing these novels that are actually legible. So I found that kind of fascinating as a parent when you just like don't really know where they're at with certain things and they just like, it appears out of nowhere, and I'm just like, oh, you have your own interior or interiority that exists that I might not be aware of, that you present at these like given moments. So yeah, he's a writer now.
Thank you. That was so heartening to hear. I do.
Justine.
Yeah. Okay. I'll share what I love about Olive. He's actually back there with my husband Glenn. Olive, say hi. What I love about my favorite thing about Olive right now. I love that she also surprised me recently with we gave her a little egg shaker that has like rice in it. And she just like picked it up and like knew to move it in this rhythmic way. And yeah, so she started making music, which is really sweet. Yeah.
Versioning music, aesthetically.
Yeah. So a first question I have, just to sort of set the context about your experiences, is I wanted to invite you all to describe your journey to parenthood, to motherhood. Whether it was a decision, whether it was, you know, anything you'd like to share about that journey.
So for me, it was sort of a long, tortured road. I knew that I wanted a child probably from my late 20s, and it became, as the years passed, more and more of like a very visceral, living wish and desire. And then I had an ectopic pregnancy. I got pregnant accidentally and had an ectopic, and it was a corneal ectopic, which is like a very rare kind of ectopic. So it was the corner of the uterus, and there was this risk that, there's always a risk that it can rupture, but in my case it was that if it ruptures, you're gonna lose the uterus, not just like a tube. And I think there was something about brushing up against the reality that I would not be able to carry, which is ironic given what I'll say in a second, but that really, I think, sharpened my focus, and it made the question of trying to have a child much more urgent. So I think that happened when I was 33, and I think it might have been a very different, 33, or maybe 32, but I think I might have been like, oh, I'll wait till my like late 30s, early 40s, we'll see how it plays out. But there was something about being told kind of repeatedly by doctors, like, if this happens, we might need to take your uterus out, and then it turned out my uterus was shaped in this really wonky way. And so a year or so later, after the ectopic had resolved, I started trying to get pregnant in earnest, and then found out that my uterus could not really carry to term. So I had a bunch of miscarriages in a row. And it was during COVID. It was like during that year. I know it was kind of, but it kind of, I'm sort of a believer in that, like, if bad things are good, like, let them happen at once. Like, there was sort of something about, it was already such a shitty time that I was like, what am I? Like, I wasn't really leaning into joy anywhere else. And so I kind of would be like, I just remember like the rhythm of my life was like, I got off at 1st and 14th, and this is when we're still wearing masks outside too. It's like in my N95, walking up and down 1st Avenue to the NYU Langone Fertility Clinic that used to be on 30 something there. And that was just like the rhythm of that summer of 2020, and then that fall, and then that winter, because it just kind of kept going and going. And then the final miscarriage, I'd heard the heartbeat like had gotten further than the others. And then I heard it slow, and then I heard it stop, and then I had to have a DNC. And I just remember I had done at that point IVF, so I had embryos, and I had been using the embryos on myself, and they were like, there was this strange, almost I mean, I'm a very like poetic, absent-minded person, but something very pragmatic kicked in, where I was like, you have, I think like 7 or 8 embryos, you've now used 3 of them on yourself. Like, you need to start thinking of, as in like I put them in myself. I mean, I didn't know. I personally just like, meaning they were like, they were implanted inside me, and then I would miscarry. So then I started being like, I'm just burning these embryos, you know. So like I started kind of like my thinking about it got really sort of ruthless in a way that I'm actually kind of grateful for. Where I was like, do I want to keep doing this? And I'd had this conversation with the fertility doctor, who's lovely, Dr. DeVore at NYU, if anyone's interested. And she had said from the beginning, she's like, we'll try it a few times, and you need to tell me how far your desire to carry goes. Because in my case, my fertility was fine in terms of eggs. So fertility wasn't an issue, it was like the vessel of carrying that was the issue. And it's really interesting, because I remember from when I was a kid, and certainly when I realized that I wanted to try to have a kid, always sort of being like, it was quite important for me to try to have a biological child. Like, there was something about my Palestinianness, something about wanting like my grandparents to live on, and I just had all these ideas about, even though it's not really a conceptualization or ideology I ascribe to theoretically. Do you know what I mean? But there was just something about it for me. And I remember always being like, pregnancy, I can take it or leave it. Birth, I can take it or leave it. And in the end, I left it. So like, that's what happened, was that, you know, we had this conversation after miscarriage, 4 or 5, and she was just like, we can try to now look for essentially another person to carry. And so that's what we did. So during God, it was like maybe 10 months into COVID. There was this woman in Canada. We used an agency in Canada. We matched like really quickly, fortunately. She was very lovely. She already had kids of her own. And I didn't meet her until the day she gave birth. Because it was also part of the restrictions of the country and my work and all of these different things. And so, if we had contracted COVID, we wouldn't have been able to get to be in the hospital room. So even when we got to Canada, we didn't go, we like remained obviously in contact, but I was like, I just don't want to risk it because I don't want to miss the birth. And so I met her the same day that she gave birth. It was wild. And I had this really surreal experience of, yeah, I got to like watch her be born and like be in the room and like be holding someone's like leg. Like it was just it was like very involved. And I remember one of my, of course, you know, I mean, during that period of time of like essentially someone else's pregnancy, you're waiting for someone else's body to do a thing. And I just remember constantly being like, what is this going to mean for like my ability to love her or to attach to her or for her to love me? And one of the biggest gifts that someone gave me was a friend of mine, Hannah, was like, listen, I've carried and birthed and I've mothered. And I can tell you that they're different things. It's not that they're not connected for some people, but they call upon different resources and they call upon different skills. And I just like really held on to that during the months of pregnancy. And then I just, the day she was born, I literally have never thought of it since then. Meaning I've never been, that was a question I was so preoccupied with, and then the second she entered the world, I was like, what's that? It was a very long story, but it was a long journey.
I have so many questions, like follow-up questions. I don't know if I even talk about myself now. We'll come back to this later. For me, you know, I grew up in a very patriarchal family. You know, I think about this a lot now. I'm like, I think I'm the first maternal, like, I'm gonna start that for myself. So I think before kids, I didn't know if I wanted to be a mom. And I realized that after I gave birth, the first birth was very long. And I remember they were about to send me to the C-section table. And I remember being like, okay, I'm ready to be a mom, fuck it. And then she came out, it was 4 hours pushing. And I realized, looking back now, I just wasn't ready to accept motherhood in many ways, not just like being responsible for somebody else, because that's something I don't enjoy doing. But also, you know, like the concept of motherhood and what's a mom, like, you know, I just had really, you know, I wouldn't say negative, just patriarchal views in my mind before then. I didn't realize that until I gave birth, how it affected me my entire life. So that was a great reckoning for me. You know, also like the body, the contractions, I'm still inspired by contractions to this day. It's just fueled a lot of my work personally and the way I walk through life. The pain, I guess, I don't know how to describe that. It's pain, I'll just say pain. And the fact that my body did all that to produce a child is just, it's so inspiring to me still that we can do that. So that was like the first concept of mothering that made me realize, wow, this is like so strong, and how come that wasn't taught to me? Like, I didn't hear about this element of birthing and then now mothering, nurturing, all that stuff. Like, why is that not heightened in the world I grew up in, especially? So yeah, that was my entry, unplanned. My second child, also unplanned. COVID times, she was a at-home birth, except I still had to go to the hospital because my placenta couldn't come out after 2 hours. And they're like, you should go to the hospital. I was like, yeah. And then I think it stayed in for another 5 hours, which is probably not great. But they gave me a bunch of ketamine, so that was great. While they removed my placenta physically with their hands. Yeah. I didn't feel any of it. I was tripping. I was in like the Interstellar library when that happened. It was crazy. So yeah, I think, you know, I still think about that, the experiences and how we, I think as people, in some ways we we die, and then we become a new person. And I do believe that I died twice, and now I'm a new person, and I'm looking forward to my next death in some ways. So
It's beautiful. The stories, man, the stories. Also, I think that mothering is so interesting because it's like we require so many people. It's not a solitary journey. And there's so much conditioning, there's so much, and just the connections that we have to all kinds of people, whether you have a doula or midwife or medical professionals, family, friends who are really offering so much support because all of us need so much support. And I just think that it's such a collaborative experience, and that's why I think it's hard to talk about because it's not one person that really needs to be doing the talking. It really is like a whole room full of people, in Canada and in LA and all, in every country. My personal experience is that my family is everywhere, so I have a very kind of international group of people that I'm always trying to coordinate with for support. But it's such a collaborative experience, and I think living under capitalism, living in the sort of situations that we live in, it's very difficult to talk about something that really unites us and connects us all, and actually is urgently needed to see how we rely on each other, And it's such a beautiful thing, and also we have such nuanced stories. No one could tell these stories. These are all there is no media, there is no even novel that can even somehow touch just the stories that we have to tell each other just verbally. But which is why this panel is so great. So thank you, Justine. But also, for me too, I think it's a culmination of a lot of different levels of influence. I know for myself, I was the oldest sister, and I have two younger sisters, and I've always been kind of bossy, and I've always been this way. And then when I got pregnant, everyone was like, now you have an excuse to be the way you are and be bossy. And I was like, great, I love it. So, my journey to mothering was something that I definitely knew I wanted to do. I definitely planned around it, and I had a specific date. I thought it would be perfect, and I got close to that date, so that was good. So the first one was very planned. The second one was not so planned, but I got to have two very different birthing experiences, and that was also just a joy to experience the very wide range of experiences one can have with the medical system that we have right now, which is very flawed, but also having I had this experience, I had a home birth as well, my second one, and having women looking at me for hours upon hours, looking at me, being with me, having a Cardi B dance party, doing the whole thing to channel and be present in the body and go through all those contractions and everything. It was a really, it was just a mind-blowing experience. And it is one of those things where I'm why is it, these are just really intense experiences. So anyway, yeah, it was, but it was good to have sort of a lot of different experiences with it. And the medical system is crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, and that's it. That's it.
I don't think, I didn't really want to be a mom for most of my life before I became one. So I was always kind of on the fence of, and I think the example I took was obviously my own mother, and seeing sort of that she had taken on mother as a full identity. And for me, I wanted to reject that all my life. That I had to just take that one identity and let go of my other identities. So I felt like it was a conflict between, do I live my life or do I become a mom? And I feel like that is through sort of their perception, not my own. So being sort of introduced to parenthood in that way, just a different, thinking of different generations, I guess. Living here, being an artist was another aspect to that, where I was like, I don't really have any mom friends. How am I going to do this? And it just wasn't an easy decision, but when I did become pregnant, I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. And was also surprised by how many friends who aren't parents were there to support and curious and wanting to be there for me and my partner. So that was really inspiring, and that kind of got me to the point of birthing. And birthing was just, yeah, it just wasn't my favorite thing, you know? It was just like, I did not like it, you know? So it was very traumatic, a lot of just stuff that I don't really need to go into, but I think once the baby was there, I thought I would be like, okay, this is all worth it, the pain, all whatever, you know, it's gonna be all worth it. But I had actually, to be honest, a difficult time connecting with my baby for, I wanna say, the first year. And I think looking back on it, I just had very intense postpartum. And that went into the second year, and I was still not really there yet. I was like waiting for the moment to like connect with my baby, who was so cute. He was so cute, and I think I kind of took a step back a little bit in sort of self-preservation mode, as a lot of my friends kind of jumped in to like come and help give him a bath, or you know, take him for a walk around Chinatown, or, you know, all of these things. I kind of felt like, looking back at that time, I feel like I'm just watching a movie a little bit. So I think that's really what that was postpartum depression. And that lasted, I want to say, for about 3.5 years. So that part wasn't fun. But I think through that, like you were talking about, sort of like in terms of death and life and kind of rebirth. That was like a big sort of situation where I really felt like it was a long death, but the rebirth was glorious, you know? And I really felt like I received sort of a lot of love for myself once I understood what situation I was in. So, yeah, that's...
Thank you for sharing such, like intimate experiences and observations. I really appreciate your vulnerability right off the bat. I want to talk a little bit about your practices as artists and how being a mother, thinking about your children, raising children, has shaped that, and the other way around. So how is your practice shaped how you raise your children and how you think about experience being a mother? Yeah.
I think in terms of, I think the practice influenced mothering in that there's something inherent in like writing and poetry, or like the way that I practice poetry, the way that I practice writing, that's very, it requires a fair amount of imagination, and it requires a lot of just like meandering and thinking and daydreaming and play. And I think that has sort of served me well. But you know, it's funny, I was talking also about the postpartum, like I think about this a lot too, which is like wanting a child, having wanted one very badly, did not ensure that, it didn't mean anything. Like it wasn't a guarantee that when the child arrived, I was going to have a connection with the child, or I was going to be, crucially, a good fit for the child. This is a big thing in psychology when you think about parenting, is like goodness of fit, is that it's personality, it's like dating, it's like anything, you know what I mean? Like you can be matched with a kid that's just like, they trigger you in certain ways, right? Or they have their, you know, like they're just like, your personalities just are at odds, and it's not anybody's fault. And it's one of the big predictors of success in parenting, is like a big percentage of it is just like goodness of fit of the parent and the child. And so I say that to say, like, I think I remember as I was getting closer to the day that she was going to be born, being like, oh, this doesn't actually mean anything. And then I felt very lucky, because I also, this is, I think, important to say, it's like bypassing any postpartum risk too. So that's the other thing, is I feel like I had a very alert, engaged, joyful, lovely first few months. Because someone handed me a baby, for all intents and purposes, do you know what I mean? I was living a life the day before, and that was disorienting in its own way, that I hadn't had a chance to adjust to the fact that something was gonna upend my existence. But I was just a person in the world, and then I was a person in the world with a baby, and I wasn't breastfeeding, I wasn't having to recover from a C-section or an intense birth, my hormones were fine, so I think that's also a big part of it. And to go back to the question is, I also think so far, our personalities are quite well suited for each other. She's also sort of a dreamy, inquisitive, stubborn kid, she also is a kid who will, she's come with me to a bunch of book events. She's going with me on my book tour next month. I'm solo parent, that I guess is relevant to say. And so she's with me a lot. We've traveled internationally a bunch and throughout the States and whatever. And so she kind of knows how to keep herself busy, and she my mom is always she reminds me so much of you, and she reminds me so much of my childhood, and it's really weird. Because there's a way where I'll look I'll be I just need 2 minutes, and she'll be okay, and I'll turn around and she's already in the middle of this very vivid, lush, imaginative game, where she's telling a story and the story keeps going, and I'm well, I remembered that, but I didn't remember it until I saw it, because nothing's reminded me of it before, and so I think in that way, it's easy to, my impulse is to say, well, I'm inquisitive, I am also a psychologist, I pay attention to details, I like to ask questions, whatever, I'm curious about people, but I think the being in front of me is one that inspires that curiosity, because she also seems to be, she has a tempo in life that matches mine, and so I think that's just been a nice fit. And again, kids, you raise 1,000 kids in one kid, right? So I don't know what she's gonna be in a year, I don't know what she's gonna be in 2 years, but so thus far. And then I think the reverse is, how has, mothering in practice? I think it's changed my relationship to time immensely. I think time has just become a completely new beast, and how I enter it and interact with it has totally shifted. I just don't think of it, the stakes of time are different now, so if I have half an hour, I feel so much more present here than I would have if I did this 4 years ago, because this is the time that, any time that I'm not with her has to count now in a different way, which I do think is still a way of thinking that I need to outgrow. I do think that's also putting a pressure on me that's not sustainable as an artist and a person. But there is something where I'm I have a half an hour to write, and before I'd be fucking off, or I'd just be pretending. So sorry. We've had a long conversation about words for mama and words for little girls, because I have not been able to filter that. Anyway, so essentially, there's a thing where it's if I have half an hour before, I'd be well, whatever, if I get to the thing I don't. And now I'm this half hour is pulsing with a different kind of value and meaning than it was before, And so I actually find that I've been more productive but because because I have to use the time differently. Yeah, that's my answer.
I'm trying to get there.
You're I still don't care.
I'm late everywhere. I got here a minute before you got here and felt so good about myself that someone was later than me.
I feel also before kids, I think my career and my work was so important to me. And afterwards, I'm whatever. It's just a job. It's just something I'm good at from time to time, I feel. And I'm not always good at it. It actually made me start over in many ways. I think I had a lot of attachments to my work that were external. And also, based on, many things I put in my head, whatever that means. It's very external attachments to my work. But now I feel I am going back to the basics again. Part of it is because my kids are starting from the basics, and I just love how curious they are, and they're just so happy at small things that I've taken for granted. And I think I have became really jaded with my own work for a really long time, especially because of all the external attachments to it. Not just making money with it, which is a big part of it, but you know, as it goes when you are in your work for a really long time. I think I also had a big burnout while I became a mother. Maybe that was postpartum. Because I realized after my second was born, I worked really hard that year. I did a lot of big projects, and then I just completely was like, I was so burnt out, and I'm still recovering from that 3 years later. But I think I'm growing in a much more, like my foundation with it is so much more about community, it's so much more about nurturing. It just comes from a better place, and I'm a lot easier on myself now. So that's been really nice. I'm not trying to, you know, push myself into ways that just doesn't feel good. So that's a change, and I've been really enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wonderful, it's such a great opportunity to reconsider your priorities, to reconsider how you want to wake up every day, what space you want to be in. And for me, I have this it's still so fresh to me, like the first time I took a walk out with my eldest when he was born, like it was like, I don't know, like a week or something, or a few days after he was born, and I was like walking through the streets of Jackson Heights, and it really did feel like a whole new experience. Like the trees looked different, like it felt a little trippy. But the other thing that was so radically different is I looked at every single person, and maybe this is a cliche moment, but I was like, every single person came through the mothership. I was like, we all came here through the mothership, and I was like, oh my God. And I had this revelation where I was like, this is untenable. This is crazy. You know, I was like, we all got here through this vessel. And I was like, and we the vessel. So that was just like mind-boggling. And I was like, how are we all doing the things that we're doing right now? Like, how is everyone being just like casually walking down the street? I felt like every step I was taking was like a little wobbly, and maybe it was like that learning to walk feeling. But I was like, I'm learning to walk. I'm learning to step into this world where I'm not sure about anything anymore. Like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to survive, how I'm supposed to enable other people's survival. Like, I'm not quite sure. And it was like a real space of unknowing. But also like unlearning, like I think also like I had certain pressures I had been putting on myself before having a kid, and it felt so urgent at the time, like, oh, like what are people gonna think or say or do? And then after having my first, I really do remember not giving two shits ever again. Like, sorry, we're gonna keep swearing on this panel, but like I just, maybe not two shits is too severe, but just basically I do remember going back to studio a few months afterwards and being like, I have infinite energy for this, weirdly, because I was like, I'm just so focused. I have like the same thing, like 2 hours to do this. It was a big moment for me because I decided to work with an assistant, and I'd never done that before, but I was like, now there's no way I can be in the studio with a baby, because I was bringing my baby to studio, and I was like, I need help. And then I was like, I need to be bigger than myself if I'm gonna make it. Like, I gotta learn to ask for help, I gotta call people in, I gotta tap some folks in, I gotta be a community member, because like, I can't do this by myself. And I had this real reckoning where I was like, okay, it's not a solitary studio practice anymore, it's like, it's everybody's here. Like, doors open, whoever wants to come and say hi to me, please do. Like, you know, so that was like a really big thing. It really did shift how I entered the studio, how I made work, like who I let into the studio, and it just cracked me open. I made much better work, quite frankly, after my first one was born. So, and then, you know, parenting is always influenced by being an artist, because like, we're so scrappy, we're so able to do anything with like pretty much nothing. And I'm always like, yeah, the cardboard box is the best toy, you know, like just call in the friends and, you know, just be really creative in a parenting kind of process, and have parenting be fun, and have parenting be a place of creativity and problem solving, and, you know, not see it every time I'm like feeling a little frustrated. It's like, how can I just be creative with this moment? Like, how can I meet this moment? Like, 3-year-old's not going to be anything different than a 3-year-old right now, but like, how can I make this work for me? So I think they're really conducive. They're actually very interconnected.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's like being a mom and being an artist, the source is sort of the same, I feel like. The energy source is very similar. Between my partner and I'm like the not so fun, like strict one. I really tried hard not to be, but my partner is like the adventurous, like let's go outside, let's play, and kind of, you know, watching myself grow into a parent, and I'm starting to learn that, oh, I need to learn how to play. And that's been weirdly difficult for me, like a kind of a struggle where like, oh, how can I let loose? How can I be like unserious? I think that's like something that is has been challenging, but also the biggest lesson for me. Especially being back in my studio, I used to think about them as two very separate things, studio practice and mom at home. And I think the answer to that is to just really kind of blend them in as much as possible and organically and welcome your child in. So what I really did start doing in my own practice is just like have Nima around, you know, and he can read his book, he can help me with some things, or I can give him a couple of materials. But I think he sees a lot. My husband's also an artist, so he spends a lot of time in his studio and my studio. And the other, like, when he was 3 or 4, I think he was like, I was like, what do you want to be when you get older? And he's like, well, I don't really want a job like you and Dad. And I was like, right, okay, that's cool. I'm glad you don't think it's work, you know? So in that sense, I was like, okay, he's taking it in as like, I guess it looks like we're having fun, you know? Yeah. So, you know, it's just interesting to see his perspective of what we do. And so as much as, you know, he sees the process of making art, I try to bring him from like A all the way to Z. So, you know, the process of making art. And sometimes I'll pick him up from school. He'll be like, how was your day at the studio? You know? And that's really nice because no one else asked me that. I'm like, well, today was a little frustrating. I didn't really get that much done, you know? But it's kind of like he understands that that's kind of what we do. And I try as much as I can to bring him also to the exhibition openings to see like, this is what it's about. Or like, here is our community, and now it's in the world. It's like, there's like this very solitary moment of like thinking and doing and making, and there's also like this sharing aspect to the art making that is as important as the making too. So he really, we've tried very hard from the beginning, from when he was very little, to take him to all the openings that my husband and I do. So I think, yeah, I like that he thinks that we're just playing. You know?
I was like, that's great.
Thank you all. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to do a brief show and tell from the artists, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. Okay, so this question is actually just an opportunity for you all to vent. So can you share a time of frustration when you felt like either your role as a mother or as an artist was being ignored or diminished? What did you say, or what do you wish you said?
Spicy.
I'm trying to think. I think that I have maybe done the diminishing of the role as a mother. In the first few months after she was born, I really felt isolated, and I think I had a lot to do with that isolation. I didn't join any of the groups. I didn't go to any of the meetups because I kind of felt like I was trespassing a little bit. I think because the first few months, it's sort of like the 4th trimester, and it was like I had gone to one thing, and I remember just being like, I don't think I'm supposed to be in this space. Like, people were talking about their breastfeeding and bodies and the birth stories and whatever, and I remember just feeling, it wasn't even like I didn't feel unwelcome. I felt like I was really intruding. and so I think there might have been a narrative there that I gave myself. I don't think I've never really felt it externally. I do think I sometimes, just because I do most of the labor alone, will sometimes feel that frustration with my kid's dad, where I'm just like, I don't know how you think there's 7 of me, and like you're somehow still like this. I mean, just now, like I was like, I can't go until there's another person in the house. Do we understand that conceptually? And so if you're late, I'm late. If you're whatever, I'm. And so I think there is sometimes where I think there's and the other thing I'll say too is when there's a sick day, I have noticed that similar thing. And this is, and I don't even, I mean, there's a lot of ways that I could just complain about this particular individual, but I actually think that's, and I will. But I think it's actually societal. Like, I do think there's a way in which then you compare the two kinds of work. And so if you know, he has like this 9 to 5, whatever, and if I have like a reading, or I'm like, I actually have to go because I have to run this workshop, she's sick, I need coverage, I need whatever, he'll be like, yeah, but I have work. And I'm like, motherfucker, I have work too. So there's a thing, there's just a thing there where I've noticed like the value of, like if I have, for instance, a class I'm teaching at NYU, or something that's seen or sort of like societally sanctioned as official W, like capital W work, it's one thing. And then if I'm doing something that's seen as just sort of like your side thing, or like the hustle or the whatever, I've noticed that gets like, yeah. Where it's like, that's the thing that's easy to cancel. That's the thing that you can kind of overlook, and that's, yeah.
I definitely experience the same. I think the question is, when do I feel like my role as a mom is diminished? I mean, kind of piggybacking what you're talking about, like the difference between a mother and then the male partner, or the other, or whoever takes on the dad role. I mean, the one thing I noticed for me is my brain totally changed after I gave birth. For example, you know, if I could hear my kid whine in the middle of the night, and I'll be like, I'm up! Like, okay, are you okay? Or like, you know, I hear like a tiny sound. I even wear earplugs. Whereas my partner, he sleeps through the night when the kid is crying next to him in his ears. Which I'm like, how did you do that? And you're right, it's like the diminishing is maybe on I totally am feeling it, what you're saying, because, you know, for the last 5-6 years, you know, I feel like I just took on the role of mother way more than any other roles. Even though, I mean, I'm still out with friends, I think I took on the role of just being a person outside of like an artist. So I feel like I also put maternal tasks as a priority, whereas my partner is more like, oh, but I have like golf practice at like, you know what I mean? Or he's like, oh, I have like this shoot I'm just doing for fun. And I'm like, wait, I should be doing that, and I'm not doing that. And I'm mad at him, but he's like, why don't you do that? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Why am I not putting my own self as priority? Why am I not, you know, being like, oh, I want to go on this trip and just do it for myself? I just haven't done that, honestly. So for the last month, I'm like, oh, I really need to get on that. And I don't know what happened, but, you know, it's just how life goes. So totally, I think that's me. I'm like doing the same thing too. Yeah.
No, I agree too. It's like I haven't taken any long trips or done, you know, it's like, but it's also our comfort level. I mean, I don't know. There is a little bit of that internal like reflection on what is my comfort level, and because parenthood sometimes comes like, you know, fast, and it just, you're all of a sudden you're in it, so you don't really necessarily think of all of those subtle things about like, you know, how you prioritize yourself. You've never had to prioritize yourself before. You were just yourself, and all of a sudden now you have to contend with all these relational decision making, and it's all these micro decisions. It's like second to second to second that you're making these decisions. So I think it's one of those things that it's great if we can all have some therapy time and spend some time actually prioritizing ourselves in a you know, more considered, purposeful, intentional sort of way. But you know, beyond that, I was like, I can't shout out too much of this information, but I've definitely I had several really challenging experiences with requesting parental leave, maternity leave. I actually invented the maternity leave policy at the institution I was before. And that was wonderful because, it was a lot of work, and I wrote letters, and I had to put together the whole packet. We had to hire there was a lot of things that were done just structurally that had never been done before. And these are institutions that have been around for 30 plus years, and it had never been done before. So but the good news was once I did it, then other people did it. So then after, I think there's been 3 to 4 people after I sort of broke the seal. And that's the power that we can all have when, parents and mothers specifically can empower themselves to actually build policies and build, push back against, our systems of labor and actually build inequity. The same thing, requesting maternity pods, requesting breastfeeding stations, requesting, all of these things. None of this stuff had ever been thought of, considered in the nonprofit arts space here in New York City. It's pretty, across the board, terrible. And so myself and, like we mentioned before, I do co-run or co-organize an artist parent collective. And I think that a lot of us have had horrific, with a capital H, horrific experiences. And a lot of us have actually lost jobs or been pushed out of the systems and been called out, belittled, actually really harassed for requesting time off or for just being pregnant or having or coming back and not being 100%. There's been a lot of this policing of bodies and quite frankly harassing behavior. And so all I can say is that we need to be organized, we need to communicate. I do believe in this artist parent collective kind of format where we're able to share confidential information with each other horizontally and then say, oh, what did you do? And then we need to work person by person, group by group, organization by organization, and just say, in the life cycle of a human, we have humans employed here, yes? Great. Wonderful. Humans have life cycles, right? Humans have different needs. What can we do from an institutional, organizational perspective to consider that humans have different forms that they're taking at different times? Okay? And I just feel like it's so absurd that still to this day an artist is considered a single, basically white male with this standard income that comes from wherever. And, as somebody who runs a lot of residencies and arts organizations and programs, I'm always just how can we better consider, again, whole people that we know what humans do, it's not that weird, And so, I can't stand this idea that, children aren't allowed in spaces and that I've had to deal with so many situations and studios that don't allow children to even, as I say, darken the doorway. You can't even, walk into the space because of, whatever policies. And so these are the things that make being a normal person who maybe has other humans who require you to make sure they don't die, that you're taking care of, makes caretaking as an artist really challenging. And so my call to action to everybody is always just what can we do to make this a better place for all of us? Because just ask the questions, say the things, ask the questions. That's all I have to say.
I feel yes to everything. More on a personal note, I was diagnosed with ADHD last year. I had high suspicion that was the case, which then also kind of opened the door to my understanding of my postpartum. And the postpartum where all of a sudden I was a different person. And I couldn't recognize my reactions or my triggers or my rage or, so it's less of an event, but I think it was more kind of an eye-opening experience of, I think once that diagnosis came in, I just became a lot kinder to myself in understanding that, oh, there was a reason and I did not, it wasn't my fault. And it was a natural sort of reaction to sort of that situation. But yeah, mental health, you know? I think mental health is always important, but around any type of change and change as big as becoming a parent just requires that much more attention and care. And also understanding of especially the like very close loved ones. But I think my main thing was I just didn't know how to ask for help. And that prolonged my postpartum that much more because I just blamed myself. So I think now if I were to do it over again, I would know exactly what to ask for, how to ask for it, and I'm very vocal about it, and I can really pinpoint my reactions way more accurately. So yeah, I think if I was privy to that information or privy to myself in that way, or open to understanding myself a little bit better in that process, I think I could have saved a couple. I'm not going to regret it. It happened, you know. But yeah, I think being able to not just being vulnerable, but to ask for help, I think is a huge, huge thing. So yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. So we're going to go into a fun little show and tell. I invited each of the panelists to bring forth a piece of art, either their own or someone else's, that has a story about motherhood or represents motherhood to them. So we can go down the line. Hala, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is just an excerpt. I'm just going to read an excerpt from my, there's a memoir that I wrote that's coming out in 3 weeks, June 4th, The Strand, if you're around.
Woo!
Okay. Our children do not owe us antidotes, though sometimes, unexpectedly, they bring them anyway. Sometimes they incite a humbling, sharp love. It is a love that asks little, that doesn't need to be returned, that is replenishable. Like anything of quality, it raises the caliber of all other love. It makes us wonder if we've been calling the right thing by the right name this whole time. You, pale as a moon on the playground. Twice, I'll be asked if I'm your nanny. But I bore you, didn't I? I bore you out of want and want and want, and in the end, someone else bore you, and I loved just the same. I sit in the dark and sing, Ya Rab, Jibli baby. My father's song, revised, bring us a baby named Layla, and let the baby be nice. I'm trying to say, for so long I couldn't forgive myself. I'm trying to say, there is no resolution, who cares? I leave my marriage or I don't. I'm left or I'm not. There are 2 apartments or there is 1. There is a daughter, there is a house, there is love. There is no great reckoning. There have already been 10 million small ones. I have remade myself many times in the image of different cities, partners, addictions, recoveries. I am hungry for origin stories, and to be hungry for an origin story is to be hungry for a story of return, to retrieve whatever I can from the stories I swam in for decades, stories about where I'm from, stories about place, about my own remakings. With every recovered piece, I reclaim something for the ones that came before me too. I remake the self again and again, that thing which cries out to be remade. I learn from my land the history of those cities, the way their stories were told. For so long, their stories were told back to them like gospels, a land prehistoric, a land cut up like bread, a land erased and erasing. What gets us back to any of it but a story? They'll tell you it doesn't count, but don't listen. The revolution of a return can happen in your imagination first. It begins with being tired of letting the past govern you, of letting history govern what made you. The myth of scarcity is dismantled first by the daydream of abundance. That's something we forget about Shahrazad. She came after the stories. The stories preceded her. She was invented to give them a home, a vase for water so that they may be carried. She does not exist outside of them, but the rest of us do. In you, Layla, is the glittering Beirut pavement after rain, the ports of Boston. In you are both my grandmother's rebellious blood, following men escaping wars from one country to another, my mother's leavings, my aunts, the rage and humiliation and exile. In you is the harm and rejoicing and help of generations of women. In you live the people that made you, all of them. I wouldn't give you another story even if I could, for this is the one that made you, and it is heavy and dazzling and the truth. In you is your father's wanderlust, his father's loneliness, his father's heart giving out on a marble floor. In you is the story of sailors, occupiers, the occupied, the people who never left and the people who were made to. You will learn to live within this, as we all do. You come from people that love the way moons pull tides, or else the way tides are pulled by the moon, and someday you will have to reckon with your own unruly heart. I have no advice to give, save one thing. Don't exile anything. Turn the sun of your attention briefly, sometimes briefly, on all that awakens your love. This is your birthright, Layla. You will have to hunt for many things, excavate them in others or yourself, but not your mother's truth. I will leave that right in the open for you to see.
You know how I said I'd take it easy on myself? I completely forgot to bring the thing. But your husband bought a print from me, and I brought that. I can share it. Yeah, I was like, this is great. This is a piece that I created. I think, actually, I've been really into drawing on my or on my trackpad, just on my finger. And that's what this came from. Just drawing with my finger, kind of like how my kids do it. So imitating my children. I got it printed in Minnesota. Yeah. Thank you.
Does it have a title? Oh, Feeling of Summer. So I brought, this is an intergenerational tapestry. I made this in 2021. It was like December 2021. And this was, I was invited to go to Campo Garzón, which is a residency based in Uruguay. And it was the first time I was going back to the country. My abuela passed away in 2020. And it was the first time going back to the country without my grandparents being alive. And so it was really weird. It was also my mom's first time being back without, so it was like this weird time where we were like, and we're going on this so I invited my whole family. My parents came, and my partner came, and my child came. So we all did it together, and it was kind of this amazing return. It was an amazing return, and it was kind of like we'd always been located in Montevideo, which is like the city, because our grandparents were there. So it's like all of a sudden that was not there, and we were like wandering, and it just somehow changed. We were it's like I was like mourning my abuela, and so this actually is dedicated to my grandmother, and I was rereading. She was a fierce poet. I'm kind of sad I didn't bring her poems, but I was like reciting her poems while I made a recording. So there is a recording of her poems, but she was like so fierce, and she was always like, "You want me to be this woman? Like you expect me?" She was such a rebel, so she'd be like, she was always trying to like shirk her feminine. Like she'd be like, "What are your expectations? I'm gonna defy them all." Like she was great. She was such a little rebel. So it was kind of like a time to go back and be in the country and be in the countryside and be with my family. It was like a really interesting cathartic moment where we were kind of like recreating, kind of like taking the mantle, and like being like, okay, the generation shifted, and I felt it. Like I literally felt like the mantle I felt it. And so this is kind of like that mantle passing, like I literally made it. And so I had inherited some just like linen fabrics, they're tablecloths and things like that. And so I don't host parties, obviously. I don't host dinner parties. But I was like, I know what to do with these. I'm gonna host like a intergenerational cyanotype workshop, so like families can come and we can all make these things together, and then that will be like my intergenerational space that I'm like creating. So these are all botanical arrangements that we made in Uruguay, and just with like all ages, and then I also, these are all during the pandemic. I was making a lot of cochineal. My sister lives in Mexico, and so she was like sending me she actually got stuck with us. So she was like with us the whole time. So we were like doing every craft under the sun. We were like crafting like nonstop. So there's fabric, like cochineal dyed fabric that I use too. So it was like linens for my abuela, like cochineal dyed fabrics. And then I had been doing these paintings like of vessels, of these vase-like shapes, but like over and over and over again. And then I was just like using all these materials, cutting them up, and then it was just kind of like an infinite collage that I was creating. And so all the background is all from that series. It's like infinite collage series. So this was the installation that we had in Campo Garzon, and it was just awesome. Like my kid came and he really liked the vines. And so he installed he was like, okay, the vines are part of it. So like the vines became, there was input from him. And I don't know, it just felt like this was really representation of like, all the generations. I was like, this is not something.
So yeah, this is an excerpt from a book that's going to be published. I have no idea when, but it's
when is it coming?
It's an art book that I made with my son. Yeah, I wanted to do something special, so I had Band-Aids. I have a lot of Band-Aids in my studio for previous works. So this is a letterpress of Band-Aids.
Oh my god, it's so cool.
The left side is mine, and the right side is Nina. So it was really fun. We kind of laid all this paper out, divided it into two because they're being folded in half. So I kind of went on the left side and Nemo went on the right side, and I just loved the comparison of sort of like thinking about composition with Band-Aids. So if you think about, the darker parts are the pads from the, so it's,
Genius.
well,
Straight up genius.
so when you asked me if there was anything that I could share that related to my child, this is what I thought of. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing. I think we have time for one or two audience questions before we transition to the mingling portion. Does anyone have a question for one or all of our panelists?
Hi, I have a million questions, but I'll try to narrow it down. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I had a baby 7.5 months ago, and just like everything you guys said resonated, and I just felt so seen. And I think as an artist mother, it feels like a different experience than other mothers. I think there's like a universality to being a mother, and I think being an artist mother feels so different. And I have felt so alien in mother spaces, and I have felt this sense of like, do I have to stop being an artist? And I feel like that was so resonant among you guys, and I think I'm like constantly reminding myself that it matters to keep making art, even though it feels like I should just go get a corporate job and give up my dreams to make money for a baby and more babies and a house and like whatever you feel like you're supposed to do with your life, right? Like as far as what our capitalist society tells us we're supposed to do, right? And so thank you guys so much for your generosity today. Yeah, I just heard so many like my like head feels like it's gonna fall off because I was nodding so much. Okay, so I have a million questions, but I'm gonna just ask one. As diasporic artists, I feel like there's this pressure to pass down our heritage to our children, and probably a desire as well. But as people of the diaspora, we're not the immigrant parents. Like maybe we were immigrants, but we are not our parents, right? And so I think something that I've been struggling with is just the pressure of being the only Korean parent. My partner's white, and that's something that I want to pass down. But then there's like so much pressure. So there's already so much pressure on being a mother, but now you have the added pressure of being the culture and the heritage. And you're like, God, I need like, you know, and like, yeah, and like, yeah. So I guess I'm just wondering like, just like how the hell do women just live is my question. But like, yeah, what have you passed down? And like, I guess like, yeah, that's my question. And then also like, as your identity has shifted, what has your relationship with your like identity been as like that shift into motherhood?
I know, it's another.
It's a great question. I think for me, there has now been a genocide going on for more than half of Neda's life. And my father was born in Gaza and then left when he was very young. It kept going back and forth into the 60s. And so there is this, it's this interesting mix of like, I think diasporically we're always mindful of not inserting or centering ourselves in terms of things that are happening on the ground. But it is unavoidable to think about the ways that it is luck and choices that were made 1 or 2 generations ago that have landed my daughter in an apartment in Williamsburg as opposed to in Gaza. And so I think I like my experience of mothering has been incredibly colored in the last over a year and a half at this point by the amount of, I don't want to be mindful of children, but just like things that I've seen done to children's bodies. And more than that, the disdain and apathy and sort of willful funding of that by so many people that live in the same country that my daughter is currently being raised in. It's created a lot of tension in my thinking of like, also she presents as very white, and sort of both being grateful for that and then feeling ambivalent about that. And then I also have, her dad is white. Like I try to speak to her in Arabic as much as I can. I also feel this thing of like, it's an identity that's sort of like, there's this threat of annihilation of it. So I'm just like, how do you, in all these different ways? And so it has to be present. It has to be kept alive. I have to, you know. So yeah, that has felt very visceral, and really is at the forefront. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to do it. I'm trying, you know, I try to just think about like ways to language, like, I mean, that's basically language, music, you know, like, I mean, having her be around my parents as much as possible, like my brother as much as possible, friends from different backgrounds, as much as possible. Like, I mean, just I try to kind of have, like, enrich her life in terms of exposure. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is. I don't think I'm alone in sort of just like continuously asking the question of like, what does it mean to raise a child in this country, period? And then what does it mean to raise a child with certain identity markers in this country? It's becoming a question that has more and more stakes attached to it. Yeah, so I hear you, especially with the mixed race, like especially when you're also the parent that is the culture. I love that description. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and at the same time, I am grateful on a daily basis that she's not at an age yet where she can ask any questions about what's happening or like clock it, because someday I will have to have a conversation with her about that, and I dread that month's like.
Sorry, I'm gonna talk when I think about it. Actually, it's interesting because my child is 6, and I always pack her Asian food for lunch, Chinese food. And then this year, she was embarrassed to bring dumplings to eat at lunch. And I was like, why? And she was like, yeah, because kids at my table are like, ew, what is that? Which is very...
I have 2 books.
It's like, but anyway, with that said, I'm like shocked because this is 2025, you know? We're in New York, I'm in Brooklyn, I'm in Bed-Stuy, so I'm just like, what's happening? And that was really frustrating for me because it really triggered my own upbringing. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, which is really, you know, and I had to eat sushi in the bathroom stall. I know, I was like so embarrassed because my mom would like make sushi for me, and I was like, ooh, people are gonna think it's fishy. So I think what I did with that was I had to talk with her teacher, and I said, you know, food is really important in my culture. It's like, you know, it's just us. It's like community, and accepting what we eat is really important to our identities. I actually did a show about that 4 years ago, and what the teacher did really well was she was like, okay, let's do something for like Lunar New Year when, you know, you and, you know, parents, you guys can like set up something so everyone in the class who are not exposed to Asian food or, you know, even just Asian culture, you know, has some exposure to it. I mean, mind you, they're 6 years old, so I'm not gonna be like, you're racist, you know, it's like, they're 6, they just don't know. And so, like, 5 parents and you know, organized like a whole thing for the first graders at their school. And, you know, we brought in like ink, we did like calligraphy. Some of them, like a parent brought in like different like, Asian snacks, which weren't really popular, but you know, it was just like exposing kids to this culture that, you know, even though we're in New York, even though we're, you know, 2025, there's still not, I think there's exposure that's still really limited, and maybe the way exposed is also exotified too, and tokenized, exactly. So trying to just do more of that in the school community has been just one of the things I do, and then try to just get my kids to be excited about, you know, being Chinese. You know, celebrating actually going way more harder than I've ever been on like celebrating very specific holidays, like the grave sweeping holiday that just happened, where, you know, we just burn a lot of joss papers for our ancestors. And we did that in my backyard with a group of friends. We all brought food, so just trying to do more of that as much as possible. Ancestral connection is really important to me now, more than ever, talking about ancestors and where they come from, their gifts. That's been really cool. My kids loving it, so we'll just continue on with that.
Oh my God, food is so important. Yeah. My child's a little bit, it's so crazy. That story is so crazy to me. Because my child brings every day, I give him the bamboo mat, I give him a sheet of nori, I give, for his, he rolls it himself. So in his box, he has rice, he has furikake, he has, he loves salmon sashimi. He's a sashimi kid. He's bougie, I mean, he's bougie. But we go to H Mart every day. We like H Mart's our favorite spot. So then we get like sashimi, and that's his lunch almost every lunch.
I'm shocked too.
Yeah, I'm shocked because like
you make it up. that.
He's like popular, and he's popular. Like I feel like that's like all the kids are jealous of his lunch. But anyway, that's
No kid
school.
in the 90s would even dare bring up fake
No.
food.
Oh no.
I know.
Let alone.
I give him the whole thing, like
That's
a paddle, like
insanity.
he does.
Insanity.
He has like
That's
a full. He has the.
He's crazy.
He's like he has the full bento experience. He's the full bento experience, and he eats seaweed snacks like it's crazy. But I sent his school seaweed snacks. So I sent them lots of seaweeds. If they have seaweed snacks, I give them also goldfish, but goldfish and seaweed snacks. But like food has been a really big, at least for the Japanese culture. Like he is so interested in Japanese culture, and I don't know if it's just he loves like everything about it, and he likes also just like food wise, like bubble tea is like not that that's specifically Japanese, but just like Pan Asian like experience. But and then we also like go to Asian markets a lot. Like Asian markets are a big part of, but also in my upbringing, Asian markets were always a big part of where we got our stuff. And so like I feel like supermarkets, it's like a really important thing for him to see like all the different types of fish and cutting squid, for instance, or preparing it, or preparing like eel even, or preparing like whatever. These are really difficult things to prepare. But like at least giving him some exposure to preparing seafood, and he's into knives too, so he likes cutting things. So I mean, I don't know, he's a boy, so he's like, oh, I like slicing things. But like food has been a big part of our at home, and like also my husband also is interested. Like it's like that's kind of like a connection point across the board. And we make dumplings. We make lots of. We get the dumpling. We get the paper, the wrappers, the dumpling wrappers. And he hosted a little party for his friends where we made the dumpling. Yeah, and then they can roll it out and whatever, make dumplings. So and having a steamer, the hot. You need to steam stuff, steam everything, like steam all the things. But I feel like, it is really challenging, but it's like all of us have access to our countries or our places, and that access is a huge issue. And like I do have access to Uruguay. Like my parents live there, and so it's like we can go back to Uruguay like not all the time because it's still very expensive and it's still far away. So literally on the other side of the planet, we have opposite seasons. It's like the toilet rolls the opposite way. It's as opposite as the moon is the opposite. I mean, it's opposite. So it's far away. I'm always like, this is the opposite. But it's like, so it's hard to get there. But I also feel like identity-wise, like my identity, I identify as like a leftist, as an activist, and so a big part of raising my child is also like questioning identity and making sure that he's also claiming it. And I'm like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, if you want to claim Japanese identity, you say you're a Japanese person. Japanese people, they don't all like the same thing. We don't all like the same thing. We don't all do the same thing. Same thing for Latino. Like, we don't all do the same thing. We're all going to be different. So it's more like pushing back and being like, wherever you are, it's good. Like, that's full stop. Where you are, who you are, how you speak as much language or not as much language, whatever the access points are, that's good. Like, great. If you want to enrich yourself and continue the quest, that's also great, but it's just not to say that you're lesser than, you're human, you're a full human, full stop, great. How, again, we access these things. It's a matter of sometimes privilege to actually access those things. So, it's, and then really, I've taken Kai to a lot of protests also, and just to show that, like, it's an active engagement. We're never passively engaging with identity. We're always clawing for identity. We're always fighting for identity. We're always fighting for our own identity, and we're fighting for other people's identity. And so it's like, it's not a passive thing that we just wake up and we just, it's something that we have to really talk about, contend with, and something that could change from day to day. So, and citizenship is not a stable identity, none of these things are stable. As someone who also, my family all the things. We've had all the disruptions from, having to flee countries and having citizenship ripped away and being interned in camps, and we've had all the experiences. So I'm like, I don't take any of this stuff for granted, but just understanding like none of this is stable. We have to fight for it. It's something we're constantly talking about, and to love it also, to like really, really love it. And the one time he had a little friend also who was like, "You're not really Japanese," and he was like, "No," and then I was like, "This is a good learning, this is a good time." And then I was like, "No, we can have," I was like, "No, you can," and he was like, "No, I am Japanese," and I was like, "Good." Great, that's all I want.
Wow. Well, so currently I live in a small, very, very small mountain town in Colorado, like 6,000 population. And so it's funny that you say, how are you the culture? I'm literally the culture of this town I live in. It's about like, I don't know, I'm maybe one of 10 non-white people in the entire town. So that's been really eye-opening actually. As challenging as it's been, it's really opened my eyes up to what is outside of New York. And what's outside of these like safe spaces that I call my own community.
What is it though?
It's a lot of things. It's a lot of things, but I think some of it is, also raising a child in that environment is maybe the most terrifying part. So, we've gone through the gamut of a lot of different experiences, but, when I started experiencing some type of like bullying happening with my child, that's when like I activated.
It's like exactly.
Before that I was like, oh, I'm just gonna get by and do my thing, I have to travel for work, whatever, I'm in my studio, it doesn't matter. But when it affected my son, I was like, hell no.
Hell no.
This is where I put my foot down. And so I think that really kind of made me rethink, how do we exist in this space? And what do I do? And so I think, Shawna, what you're saying was resonating with me, because I was like, I'm gonna double down and like be more present. Like I'm gonna be in the classrooms. I started teaching art in the classrooms. I was like, I'm gonna be your art teacher now. So I was in the school, I was doing activities, all the parties I'm present for, I was like, Nima, your birthday party is gonna be the best birthday party. We're inviting the entire town. We had pho, we had like, we had pho, we had summer rolls, we had like, what are they called? They bring lizards and big,
like petting zoo?
No, yeah, petting zoo, but he drove 3 hours with like 20 different like amazing creatures to pet. I was like, we're having a boa at your birthday.
I know, I'm like, oh.
So yeah, you just have to kind of go a little extra when it gets a little low, And so I definitely stepped up, and that kind of, I was like, oh, I want to instill in Nima that there's nothing to be ashamed of, and when you feel like, pushed to the side, you come back to the center and you're just like, I'm still here, and I'm very proud of it. So that's kind of what that has taught me, and it's in a way that's taught me, or like it's kind of healed my own wounds of my own childhood, of how my experience was of begging my parents to give me a PB&J sandwich instead of a stacked Korean rice soup side dish, which was amazing. With seaweed and barley water. I was like, please, I just want a PB&J. But I was just like, that was really cool, and I'm glad my parents did that. So, I'm trying to do more of that and finding ways to like connect him with ancestral lineage. Took him to Korea, and after the Korea trip, he started telling everyone, I'm half Korean and half white. And I was like, yes. So yeah, he was like very proud of it. He, He says Korea is his favorite country in the world, and you know, all of these things. I was like, okay, cool. I just have to really almost remind myself of how important that is. So.
Thank you. Okay, I think that we have to wrap things up, fortunately, but if you do have questions for any of the panelists, I think most of them will stay for a few minutes, so you can always ask them in person during the mingling portion.